My name is Harper Reed, and at 23, I finally finished college after 4 tough years of working many jobs to pay my way. My family celebrated at the Gilded Spoon, a restaurant much fancier than I could ever afford. When Grandma Beatrice arrived, her eyes sparkled with such true pride, it almost made all the hard work worth it. I felt proud, but also completely worn out. I was still facing huge debts, even though I had given up sleep, friends, and my peace of mind to pay for school. Little did I know, the tension between my grandmother and my parents was about to explode in a way no one expected. Before I tell you how my world fell apart that night, drop a comment about where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button to join me on this wild journey of family secrets and betrayal. I grew up in Willow Creek, just outside Denver, in what I always thought was a normal middle-class family. Our house was simple but comfortable. My parents, Brenda and Richard Reed, always reminded us about living within our means and being smart with money. Every talk about money ended with sighs about bills, house payments, and how expensive it was to raise kids today. Even though she lived 2 states away in Kansas, my grandma Beatrice was my rock. She visited often, bringing thoughtful gifts and truly caring about my life. While my parents often seemed busy with work and social plans, Grandma Beatrice made me feel truly seen. She called every week throughout my childhood, and when I left for college, those calls became my lifeline. College hit me hard. I had been accepted to Frontier State University with a partial scholarship, but it didn't even come close to covering the huge costs. My parents sat me down before my first year with charts and serious faces. "We'll help as much as we can," Mom said, "but we just don't have enough saved. You'll need to take out loans and work part-time." I nodded, set on making them proud and proving I could handle things on my own. I had no idea what I was agreeing to. By my second year, I was working 3 jobs: mornings at the campus library, evenings waiting tables at a diner, and weekends helping students online. My apartment was the cheapest I can find, a basement unit I shared with 3 other students that flooded every spring. My food mostly consisted of instant noodles, peanut butter sandwiches, and whatever I could bring home from the diner. While my classmates went on spring break trips and studied in other countries, I picked up extra shifts. When my laptop broke before finals in my third year, I had to beg the computer lab for more time because I couldn't afford a new one. My parents felt bad for me, but reminded me they were helping as much as possible and that this struggle would build character. I believed them. I had no reason not to. When graduation finally arrived, I felt both victorious and worn out. My business degree had cost me 4 years of my youth, my health, and left me $45,000 in debt, even after working myself to the bone. Still, I had done it, and that evening at the Gilded Spoon was supposed to be my moment of celebration. The restaurant screamed expensive from the moment we walked in: crystal lights, white tablecloths, and servers in fancy clothes. I immediately felt worried about the cost, but my parents brushed off my concerns. "Tonight is special," Dad insisted, ordering a $200 bottle of champagne while looking at the menu's most expensive dishes. I noticed Mom's new fancy purse and the shiny watch on Dad's wrist. Small luxuries weren't unusual for them, but something felt different. Their generosity tonight seemed like a show, especially with the whole family there. My younger brother, Caleb, slouched in his chair looking at his phone. He had just finished his first year at Pioneer College and somehow always had nicer things than I did. New clothes, the latest phone, weekend trips with friends. I just thought he was better with money or had jobs he never mentioned. Aunt Jessica, my mother's sister, kept giving me sympathetic looks. She had always been the family truth teller, never afraid to point out when people were being fake. Uncle Mark, my father's brother, arrived late with his usual busy energy, checking his watch and looking around the room as if searching for more important people. "Harper, darling, you look thin," Aunt Jessica said, squeezing my shoulder. "Have they been feeding you at that apartment?" "I feed myself just fine," I laughed, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. As appetizers arrived, I noticed Caleb order the $42 seafood platter without even asking our parents. Mom simply nodded her approval. A memory flashed of me calling home 3 months earlier, asking to borrow $200 for textbooks, and hearing about how tight things were that month. Little did I know, the tension between my grandmother and my parents was about to explode in a way no one expected. The conversation flowed through dinner, focusing on my achievements and future plans. I spoke excitedly about a job interview I had lined up the following week, an entry-level marketing position, a modest salary, but good potential. Inside, though, I was already figuring out how much of each paycheck would go towards student loans. "Where will you live after graduation?" Uncle Mark asked between bites of his $65 steak. "I'm staying in my apartment for now. Rent's cheap and I need to save up some money before moving." "Still in that basement place?" Mom wrinkled her nose. "Surely you can find something nicer now that you'll have a real job." I forced a smile, thinking about my bank account with its pathetic $342. One step at a time. Throughout dinner, I kept noticing small, odd things, comments, and behaviors that didn't quite match the financial reality I had been living. When Dad mentioned their upcoming trip to a tropical island as if it were a casual weekend getaway, something cold settled in my stomach, but I pushed it aside, determined to enjoy my celebration. Then Grandma Beatrice arrived fashionably late, as always, bringing her warmth and genuine enthusiasm that immediately lightened the atmosphere. "There's my brilliant granddaughter," she announced, making her way to the table with a wrapped gift and a card in hand. "I'm sorry I'm late. Traffic was terrible coming down from the city." Everyone shifted to make room, and the waiter brought another chair. Grandma settled beside me, patting my hand affectionately. "I am so proud of you, Harper," she said, her eyes misting slightly. "For years of hard work while juggling all those jobs. You're remarkable." "Thanks, Grandma," I said, feeling the sting of tears myself. "It means a lot that you came." "I wouldn't miss it for the world," she replied, then glanced around the table. "This is quite the spread. Richard, Brenda, you've gone all out tonight." My parents exchanged a quick look I couldn't quite interpret. "Nothing but the best for our graduate," Dad said, raising his glass. As dinner progressed, I found myself relaxing for the first time in months. The worry of finals was behind me, my degree was in hand, whatever struggles lay ahead tonight, I could breathe. If only I'd known how temporary that peace would be. The evening progressed pleasantly enough through the main course. Grandma Beatrice told everyone stories of my childhood achievements, science fair projects, soccer games, and that time I organized a neighborhood cleanup at just 9 years old. I blushed at the attention but secretly treasured her pride in me. "A toast," Uncle Mark announced, raising his glass, "to Harper, the hardest-working, most determined member of this family. May your career be as successful as your academic journey." Everyone clinked glasses, and for a moment, I felt truly celebrated. Mom dabbed at her eyes dramatically. "Our first college graduate," she said. "We always knew you were special, honey." Dad nodded vigorously. "Worth every sacrifice we made." The waiter came to clear our plates and present dessert menus. My parents, unusually extravagant tonight, insisted everyone order something. The table fell into casual conversation about my post-graduation plans, Caleb's college experience, and Uncle Mark's recent business expansion. That's when it happened. The moment that would fracture my family forever. Grandma Beatrice turned to me during a lull in conversation, smiling warmly as she squeezed my hand. "Harper, I meant to ask, have you decided what you'll do with your savings now that you're finished with school? I'm glad the $3,000 I send you each month is helping, but you might want to consider investing some of it now that your expenses will change." The table went silent. I stared at my grandmother, certain I'd misheard her. "What money?" I asked, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. "Grandma, I never got any money from you." The confusion on her face mirrored my own. "The $3,000 I've been sending to your parents each month for your education, ever since you started college." I felt like I'd been doused with ice water. My mind raced, calculating quickly. $3,000 a month? For 4 years? That was $144,000. "I never saw any of that money," I repeated, looking around the table. Mom? Dad? What is Grandma talking about? Everyone slowly turned to look at my parents. The color had drained from both their faces. Mom's hand froze with her wine glass halfway to her mouth. Dad suddenly became intensely interested in rearranging his silverware. There must be some confusion, Dad said with a forced laugh. Grandma Beatrice set her plate down carefully. Her eyes narrowed as she looked between my parents. Richard, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. I've been sending $3,000 every month to your joint account for Harper's education. That's $36,000 a year for 4 years. Are you telling me Harper never received this money? Caleb's head snapped up from his phone, suddenly interested. Wait, what? He asked. Aunt Jessica's expression changed from surprise to something like vindication, as though a long-held suspicion had finally been confirmed. Uncle Mark sat back in his chair, arms crossed, looking grim. I don't understand, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I've been working 3 jobs. I took out loans. I've been eating ramen for dinner 4 nights a week for years. The restaurant around us continued its ambient hum of conversation and clinking glasses, but at our table, time seemed suspended. I felt disoriented, like the floor was tilting beneath me. Brenda, Grandma prompted when my mother remained silent, would you care to explain? Mom's eyes darted around the table looking for an escape. Finding none, she attempted a dismissive laugh that came out more like a nervous hiccup. Mother, you know how expensive college is nowadays. That money helped with Harper's tuition and living expenses. Just as we discussed, but I never saw any of it, I repeated, louder this time. Several diners at nearby tables glanced over. You told me you couldn't afford to help much with tuition. You made me take out loans. Dad cleared his throat. Harper, this is hardly the time or place. I think it's exactly the time and place, Grandma interrupted, her normally gentle voice hardening. I sent that money specifically for Harper. I confirmed with you multiple times that she was receiving it. She did receive it, Mom insisted through gritted teeth. We paid her tuition bills. Only part of them, I said, memories flooding back. I had to take out loans for the rest, $45,000 worth of loans. Caleb looked between us all, confused. But you guys give me an allowance every month for expenses. Another bomb dropped. I turned to my brother. What allowance? The $1,000 you guys deposit in my account, he said slowly, realization dawning on his face. Don't you get the same? I felt like I might be sick right there at the table. All those nights I'd worked double shifts. All the times I'd counted pennies for groceries. All the doctor's appointments I'd skipped because I couldn't afford the copay. You told me you were broke, I said to my parents, my voice shaking. You told me I needed to stand on my own 2 feet. And look how well you've done, Dad attempted weakly. You've learned responsibility, work ethic. By lying to her, Grandma cut in, by stealing money I sent specifically for her education and expenses. The words stealing hung in the air like a thunderclap. We didn't steal anything, Mom hissed, leaning forward. We're her parents. We decided what was best. What was best? I repeated, feeling tears building. I worked 35 hours a week while taking full course loads. I burned myself out every semester. I couldn't afford to eat properly or get enough sleep. How was that what was best for me? Aunt Jessica reached over to put a hand on my arm. Harper, breathe, honey. But I couldn't seem to catch my breath. The restaurant felt too hot, too crowded. I want to know exactly where that money went, Grandma demanded. Every penny of it, because it certainly didn't go to Harper. My parents exchanged another look, this one panicked. We used it for family expenses, Dad finally admitted. College costs affect the whole family budget. We had to make adjustments. What adjustments? I asked. The new kitchen remodel last year, Mom's shopping trips, the boat you bought. Each example that came to mind made me feel sicker. All the times they told me money was tight while apparently sitting on thousands of dollars meant for me. This is a misunderstanding, Mom tried again. We can discuss this at home as a family. I think we're well past that point, Uncle Mark said, speaking up for the first time, his business sense coming to the forefront. He asked, Richard, Brenda, did you ever tell Harper about this arrangement with Beatrice? Their silence was answer enough. Did you tell Beatrice you were keeping the money rather than giving it to Harper? He continued. More silence. That's what I thought, he said grimly. I looked at my grandmother, whose face reflected hurt, betrayal, and growing anger. Grandma, I had no idea, I said, my voice breaking. All this time I thought you were just being supportive with phone calls and care packages. I never knew. Oh, my dear girl, she said, reaching for my hand. I thought I was helping make your college years easier. I never imagined. The waiter approached our table, sensed the tension, and wisely retreated. My entire understanding of the past 4 years of my family was crumbling around me. What had begun as a celebration had transformed into a nightmare, and we were only just scratching the surface of my parents' deception. Perhaps we should take this discussion somewhere more private, Dad suggested, glancing nervously at nearby tables where diners were beginning to notice our tension. No, I said firmly, surprising myself with my resolve. I want to know answers now. I've waited for years without even knowing I was waiting. Grandma Beatrice nodded in agreement. I've been sending that money every month since August, before Harper's freshman year. That's 4 years and 4 months, a total of $156,000. My head spun at the figure, even more than I'd calculated. The money was for your education, living expenses, books, healthy food, proper housing, and maybe even a study abroad program. Grandma continued, her voice tight with controlled anger. I thought about all the opportunities I'd missed, all the unnecessary suffering. I never studied abroad because I couldn't afford it. I lived in a basement apartment that flooded every spring. I caught pneumonia sophomore year because I couldn't afford to fix my car and had to walk to work in the rain. Mom shifted uncomfortably. Harper, you're being dramatic. Am I? My voice rose. Junior year, my laptop died before finals. Remember when I called you crying because I couldn't afford a new one and you told me there was nothing you could do? Was that when you were planning your cruise to the Caribbean, the one you said was a work trip? Caleb's eyes widened. That wasn't a work trip? Of course it was, Dad snapped, but his confidence was clearly shaken. Show me your bank statements, Grandma Beatrice demanded. Show me where that money went. We don't have to show you anything, Mom replied, her voice rising. We're Harper's parents. We make the financial decisions for this family. I'm 23 years old. You had no right to make decisions about money that was explicitly meant for me without even telling me it existed. The gravity of the situation was sinking in. This wasn't just about money. It was about years of deliberate deception. So while I was eating ramen and skipping meals, while I was working until 2 a.m. and then getting up for 8 a.m. classes, while I was having anxiety attacks about making rent, you had $3,000 a month that was meant for me? My hands were trembling so badly I had to put them in my lap. The memories came flooding back with new context. The night I'd called home sobbing because I couldn't afford both textbooks and groceries that week. The summer I'd worked double shifts instead of taking an unpaid internship that would have helped my career. The time I developed an ulcer from stress and skipped getting treatment because of the medical bills. We were teaching you responsibility, Dad insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. No, Aunt Jessica interjected. You were using your daughter as free labor while spending her money. Let's call this what it is. Uncle Mark leaned forward. I'm curious where the money actually went. Richard, that's a significant sum to absorb into regular family expenses. Caleb looked shocked. Do I even want to know how much of my allowance was actually from Grandma? None, Grandma said sharply. I sent money specifically for Harper's education. I already have a separate college fund for you that won't be accessible until you graduate, and after tonight, I'll be changing the terms of that arrangement. My brother's expression shifted from confusion to anger as he turned to our parents. So you've been giving me an allowance while Harper worked multiple jobs? How is that fair? It's not about fair, Mom said. Different children have different needs. What does that even mean? I demanded. It means that you've always been independent and capable. Caleb needs more support. I needed support too. My voice cracked as tears threatened to spill. Do you have any idea how hard these past 4 years have been? I was working 35 hours a week on top of full-time classes. I was exhausted all the time. I got shingles from stress last year. Shingles at 22? You could have asked for help, Mom tried weakly. I did. I slammed my hands on the table, causing glasses to rattle. Several nearby diners openly stared now. I asked for help constantly. You always said you were doing everything you could. My chest felt tight, breathing difficult. The restaurant seemed to spin around me. All those years of struggling, sacrificing, pushing myself to the breaking point, all unnecessary. My own parents had watched me suffer while hiding resources that were rightfully mine. I took out loans, I continued, fighting for composure. I'll be paying those for years. Why would I need loans if you had Grandma's money? A terrible thought struck me. Wait, the loan papers you had me sign my sophomore year, was that even a legitimate student loan? The guilty look my parents exchanged confirmed my worst fears. You didn't... Aunt Jessica gasped, reading their expressions. Tell me you didn't take out loans in Harper's name. It was for family expenses, Dad said defensively. We were going to pay it back before she ever knew. The room tilted dangerously. Not only had they taken Grandma's money, but they'd also committed fraud by taking out loans in my name, my credit, my financial future. Everything was compromised. How much? Uncle Mark demanded. Just $20,000, Mom said quietly. Just $20,000? I repeated incredulously. Just $20,000? Do you have any idea what you've done? Grandma Beatrice's hands were shaking as she reached for her purse. I need to see documentation of everything. The transfers to your account, these supposed loans, all of it. This is family business, Dad tried again. Family? I laughed bitterly. Is that what you call this? Families don't steal from each other. Families don't lie and manipulate and commit fraud. Harper, Mom reached for my hand, but I pulled away. We love you. Everything we did was for this family. No, I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. Everything you did was for yourselves. You watched me struggle and suffer for years while you lived comfortably on money meant for me. That's not love. I don't know what it is, but it's not love. The restaurant had gone uncomfortably quiet, with nearby tables openly watching our family drama unfold. I need some air, I muttered, grabbing my purse and heading for the door. Harper, wait, Dad called after me, but I was already pushing through the restaurant entrance, gulping the cool evening air. My graduation celebration had transformed into a nightmare revelation of betrayal that spanned years. The family I thought I knew was a facade, and I couldn't bear to look at the reality another second. I made it to my car before the tears started in earnest. My hand shook so badly I couldn't get the key in the ignition. The magnitude of the deception was too much to process all at once. For years of unnecessary hardship, for years of lies, my own parents had watched me struggle while secretly spending money that was meant to help me. As I finally managed to start the car, I caught sight of Grandma Beatrice rushing out of the restaurant, phone in hand, scanning the parking lot for me. But I couldn't face anyone right now, Not even her. I pulled out of the parking space and drove away, tears blurring my vision, forcing me to pull over a few blocks away. Alone in my car, the full emotional impact hit me like a physical blow. I doubled over the steering wheel, sobbing uncontrollably. My phone buzzed repeatedly. First my parents, then Grandma, then Caleb. I ignored them all until Grandma called a third time. Something told me I needed to answer. "Harper!" Her voice was thick with emotion. "Where are you, sweetheart?" "I don't know," I admitted through tears. "A few blocks away. I just couldn't stay there." "I understand. I'm so sorry, my dear. So terribly sorry. I had no idea." She paused. "Can we meet tomorrow? There's much to discuss, and I want to help make this right." As the initial shock began to ebb, it was replaced by something else: determination. My graduation marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. I'd survived 4 years of unnecessary hardship. I could survive this betrayal too. "Yes," I told my grandmother, taking a deep breath. "Let's meet tomorrow. I think it's time for some honesty in this family." I barely slept that night. My small apartment, which had always felt like a symbol of my independence, despite its many flaws, now seemed like evidence of an elaborate gaslighting campaign orchestrated by my own parents. The cracked ceiling, the temperamental hot water, the secondhand furniture, all of it should have been unnecessary given the financial support Grandma that she was providing. By morning, my emotions had crystallized from shock into righteous anger. I arrived at the small cafe where Grandma Beatrice had suggested we meet, to find her already waiting, a thick folder on the table beside her coffee cup. "I was up all night gathering documentation," she said, hugging me tightly before we sat down. "I called my bank, accessed years of statements, found all the email confirmations." Her eyes were rimmed with red, her usual perfect appearance slightly disheveled. I realized with a pang that she'd been up all night too, dealing with her own sense of betrayal. "I trusted them," she said quietly. "I trusted them with your well-being." The waitress came for our order, but neither of us had much appetite. We both requested just coffee. "I have copies of every transfer," Grandma continued, opening the folder. "Monthly payments of $3,000 starting August before your freshman year. I have emails from your parents thanking me, telling me how the money was helping you focus on your studies instead of working so many hours." She pushed several printed emails across the table. Reading my father's detailed fabrications about how I was thriving with less financial pressure made my stomach turn. "They sent me updates about you," she continued, "how you were able to join study groups instead of rushing to work, how you were eating better, sleeping more, even considering study abroad options." Each lie was more elaborate than the last. While I'd been working myself to exhaustion, my parents had been crafting a fictional college experience to report to my grandmother. "They even sent me this photo," she said, sliding a photo across the table. "It showed me smiling in front of what appeared to be an apartment building. They said this was your new apartment sophomore year, made possible by my financial help," Grandma explained. "They said you had a nice place with just one roommate instead of 4. I stared at the photo. This isn't an apartment I've ever lived in. This picture was taken when we visited Caleb at his dorm. They cropped him out." The deliberate nature of their deception was staggering. This wasn't opportunistic, it was calculated and sustained over years. My phone buzzed with yet another text from my mother. "We need to talk as a family. Please come home." I silenced it without responding. "What do we do now?" I asked Grandma. "That depends on what you want," she replied carefully. "What they've done is wrong on multiple levels, morally and legally. Taking money under false pretenses, opening fraudulent loans in your name, these are serious matters." Before I could respond, the cafe door opened and Aunt Jessica walked in with a professional-looking woman I didn't recognize. "Hope you don't mind the company," Aunt Jessica said, sliding into the booth beside me. "This is Vivian Parker. She's a friend and a financial crimes attorney." "I'm not sure if I want to pursue legal action," I said hesitantly. "Just information for now," Vivian assured me. "No decisions needed today." Over the next hour, Vivian explained my options in clear terms:
The loans taken out in my name constituted identity theft and fraud. The misappropriation of funds from Grandma could potentially be prosecuted as elder financial abuse, given that she was over 65 when the arrangement began. Best case scenario, Vivian explained, would be full financial restitution without criminal charges. They repay everything: the diverted funds, the fraudulent loans with interest, and you decide whether to maintain a relationship with them. My phone continued to buzz. Caleb had now sent several messages. Mom and Dad are freaking out. They say there's more to the story. Please call me at least. I finally responded to my brother. Meeting with Grandma and Aunt Jessica. We'll call you after. As we wrapped up our meeting, another text came through. This one from my father. We're prepared to make this right. Please come home so we can talk. Something about his wording bothered me. Not "we want to apologize" or "we're sorry for what we did," but "we're prepared to make this right," as if this were a business negotiation rather than a profound betrayal. I think I need to confront them, I told Grandma and Aunt Jessica. I need to hear whatever explanation they think justifies this. You don't owe them that, Aunt Jessica said. I know, but I need it for myself. Grandma nodded understanding. We'll go with you. No, I said, finding strength in my voice. I need to do this myself first, but I'll call if I need backup. An hour later, I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home. The house I'd grown up in suddenly looked different to me. The recent landscaping, the new front door, the luxury SUV in the driveway. How much of this had been paid for with money meant for my education? Both my parents met me at the door, relief evident on their faces. Harper, thank goodness, Mom said, attempting to hug me. I stepped back, keeping physical distance between us. I'm only here to hear what you have to say. That's it. They exchanged nervous glances as they led me to the living room. I remained standing while they sat on the sofa. First, we want you to know we love you very much, Dad said. Love doesn't steal, I replied flatly. Love doesn't watch someone struggle unnecessarily. It's complicated, Mom said, wringing her hands. When your grandma first offered the money, we had every intention of giving it all to you. What changed? I demanded. They looked at each other again, a silent communication passing between them.
The first year of your college, we had some financial setbacks, Dad explained. My commission structure changed at work. We had unexpected expenses. We used a little of the money to cover household costs, just temporarily. A little. We meant to replace it, Mom insisted. But then we got used to the lifestyle, and one thing led to another. What things exactly? I pressed. What was so important that it justified watching me work myself sick? Dad sighed heavily. We took some trips, made some investments, helped Caleb with his startup idea. The podcast network? I asked incredulously. The one that lasted all of 3 months before he got bored? That cost enough to justify stealing over $150,000 from me? We didn't think of it as stealing, Mom said defensively. We're your parents. We thought we were making decisions for the family. What about the loans in my name? I asked. Was that also a family decision? Their silence was damning. Do you have any idea what you've done to me? My voice shook with emotion. I worked 3 jobs. I got sick from stress. I lost friends because I never had time to socialize. I lived in a moldy basement. I ate ramen for days on end. You're stronger for it, Dad tried weakly. Don't you dare, I snapped. Don't you dare try to pretend this was for my benefit. What do you want from us now? Mom asked, her tone suggesting I was being unreasonable. I want the truth, all of it. Then I want every penny back, including the loans you fraudulently took out in my name. And I want to know why. Why would you do this to your own daughter? Dad looked down at his hands. We never meant for it to go this far. We started with small amounts, justifying it because we were helping Caleb too. Then it became normal. We told ourselves you were doing fine, that you were learning valuable lessons about independence. While Caleb got an allowance, I asked bitterly. Caleb is different, Mom said. He needs more support. So you decided I needed less without even asking me, without even telling me about Grandma's generosity? We made a mistake, Dad admitted. A terrible mistake that got worse over time. But we can fix this. How exactly do you plan to fix years of unnecessary struggle? I demanded. How do you plan to fix the fact that you committed fraud and identity theft?
We'll pay back everything, Dad said quickly. The loans, the money from your grandmother, all of it. And where will this money magically come from? Grandma Beatrice? They had no answer for that. I've spoken with the financial crimes attorney, I said, watching their faces pale. What you've done is criminal. You could go to jail. You wouldn't do that, Mom whispered. We're your parents. Parents don't do what you did, I replied coldly. I haven't decided what I'm going to do yet, but first, I want to see everything. Bank statements, loan documents, all of it. Harper, be reasonable, Dad started. Reasonable? I laughed harder. You want to talk about reasonable after what you've done? Show me the documents or my next call is to the police. The threat worked. Dad went to his office and returned with a stack of papers. For the next hour, I went through years of financial records, my anger growing with each discovery. They hadn't just diverted Grandma's money, they'd been living far beyond their means while I struggled unnecessarily. The tropical cruise, the kitchen remodel, Mom's shopping sprees, Dad's boat, weekend getaways, Caleb's expensive hobbies, all while I'd been working until exhaustion, taking out loans and living in substandard conditions. I'll need copies of all of these, I said, when I'd seen enough. What are you going to do? Mom asked, fear evident in her voice. I stood up, gathering the papers. I haven't decided yet, but whatever happens next, it will be my decision. For once, I'll be the one in control of my life, not you. As I walked toward the door, Dad called after me. Harper, please, we're still your parents. We still love you. I turned back one last time. Love requires trust, and I don't trust either of you anymore. Leaving my childhood home, I felt simultaneously broken and stronger than I'd ever been. The family I thought I had was gone, revealed as an illusion. But for the first time in years, I was seeing clearly, and that clarity, painful as it was, gave me power I never possessed before. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of meetings, phone calls, and emotional reckonings. I met with Grandma Beatrice and Vivian, the attorney, multiple times, documenting everything and exploring our options. Caleb and I spoke daily, his initial shock evolving into anger on my behalf as he came to understand the magnitude of our parents' deception. I had no idea, he kept saying. I swear, Harper, if I'd known they were giving me money that should have been yours, I believed him. Caleb had always been somewhat self-absorbed, but not malicious. He was another victim of our parents' manipulation, albeit one that benefited rather than suffered. A week after the restaurant confrontation, I met with my parents again, this time with Grandma, Aunt Jessica, and Vivian present. The atmosphere in our family lawyer's office was tense and formal, a far cry from the warm family gatherings I'd once known. Here's what's going to happen, Vivian stated, laying out documents on the conference table. You will pay off Harper's student loans in full immediately. You will return the remaining money with interest according to this payment schedule. You will transfer the title of Harper's car to her name. My parents sat stiffly, their own attorney beside them as Vivian continued outlining the settlement terms. In return, Harper is willing to not pursue criminal charges for the identity theft and fraud, provided you comply fully with these terms. And if we don't? Dad asked, earning a warning look from his lawyer. Then we proceed with both civil and criminal complaints. The documentation is quite thorough. I wouldn't advise testing that option. After some negotiation on timeline details, my parents signed the agreement. The relief on their faces made it clear they understood how narrowly they had avoided legal consequences. As we prepared to leave, Mom attempted one last emotional appeal. Harper, when will we see you again? We're still family. I looked at her, this woman I trusted, implicitly for 23 years, and felt nothing but a hollow ache. I don't know, I answered honestly. Right now, I need space to process everything. But it's almost summer, the family vacation. I won't be there, I cut her off. I think that's obvious.
Outside the office, Grandma Beatrice linked her arm through mine as we walked to our cars. I've made some changes to my financial arrangements, she told me. I've set up a trust for you that your parents cannot access under any circumstances. The remaining money they owe you will go directly into that account. You don't have to do that, I said. I want to, she insisted. I failed you once by trusting the wrong people. I won't make that mistake again. Back at my apartment, I began the process of rebuilding my life on more honest foundations. The first step was moving out of the basement unit that had been my home through college. With the settlement requiring my parents to pay off my student loans immediately, I could redirect the money I'd been saving for loan payments toward a security deposit on a better apartment. My roommates were supportive, if confused by the sudden family drama. I explained as much as I felt comfortable sharing. So, your grandmother thought she was paying your way through college, but your parents kept the money? My roommate Zoe summarized. That's seriously messed up. Tell me about it, I agreed, packing books into a cardboard box. What are you going to do about your relationship with them? Asked Jenna, my other roommate. I honestly don't know, I admitted. Right now, I'm just trying to get through each day. I'd started seeing a therapist, using some of the settlement money to finally address the mental health issues I'd been too financially strained to treat properly during college. Dr. Cooper helped me understand that what I'd experienced was a form of gaslighting and financial abuse. Your parents manipulated reality, she explained, during one session. They created circumstances that caused you genuine hardship, all while telling you this hardship was normal and necessary. That's deeply traumatic. Caleb visited my new apartment the day after I moved in, bringing housewarming wine and obvious guilt. I gave back the money they sent me this month, he told me, and I'm getting a job. No more allowance. That's good, I said, arranging dishes in my new kitchen cabinets. But you know this isn't about you, right? I know. He perched on a bar stool at my new counter. But I feel like an accomplice. All those times you talked about working overnight shifts or not being able to afford things, I should have questioned why I had it so much easier. We both trusted them, I pointed out. That's what kids are supposed to do with their parents. He nodded miserably. Do you think you'll ever forgive them? I paused, considering the question seriously. I don't know. Forgiveness might be possible someday. Trust is a different matter. 2 weeks after the settlement, Dad showed up at my new apartment unannounced. I almost didn't answer the door when I saw him through the peephole, but something compelled me to hear what he had to say. This is nice, he commented, looking around the modest but clean one-bedroom unit. Much better than that basement place. What do you want, Dad? I asked, not inviting him to sit. He seemed smaller somehow, less like the authoritative father figure I'd grown up with, and more like a man who knew he'd made unforgivable mistakes. I wanted to give this to you in person, he said, handing me an envelope. Inside was a receipt showing my student loans had been paid in full, and to tell you that the car title transfer is complete. It's officially your car now. Thank you, I said, stiffly. You could have mailed this. I wanted to see you, he admitted. Your mother she's not handling this well. She still doesn't fully understand why you're so upset. And do you? I challenged. He was quiet for a moment. I'm starting to. When I saw that basement apartment for the first time last week, when I realized that's where you've been living while we had that money, he trailed off, shaking his head. I don't expect forgiveness, Harper, but I hope someday we can have some kind of relationship again. I can't make any promises, I told him honestly. Right now, I'm just trying to rebuild my life on honest terms. As he turned to leave, he paused at the door. For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not just for getting caught, but for what we did. You deserved better from us. It wasn't enough, not nearly enough to heal the breach of trust, but it was the first genuine acknowledgement I'd heard from either parent that the wrong was in their actions, not in my reaction. The job I interviewed for before graduation came through, offering a starting salary that felt luxurious compared to my cobbled-together income from part-time jobs. For the first time, I could afford basic necessities without constant anxiety. I began building an emergency fund, contributing to retirement, and even set aside money for occasional small luxuries like dinner out with friends. Grandma Beatrice became a more regular presence in my life, visiting every few weeks and calling more often.
We were rebuilding our relationship on more honest ground, both of us processing the betrayal we'd experienced. The hardest part, she confided during one visit, is accepting that I missed the signs. All those times I visited and you seemed so tired when you mentioned working late nights or skipping meals to save money, I should have questioned why my financial support wasn't helping. We both trusted them. I echoed my words to Caleb. That's not our failing, it's theirs. As summer progressed, I established new boundaries and routines. I maintained limited contact with my parents, brief, factual texts about the settlement implementation, but nothing personal. Mom's attempts at emotional manipulation continued. Your father and I miss you so much. Families should stick together. But I found them easier to recognize and resist with distance in therapy. The path forward wasn't clear, but for the first time in years, it was genuinely mine to determine. The foundation might have been built on painful revelations, but it was solid in a way my previous life had never been, because this time it was built on truth.
My brother Caleb had become an unexpected source of support, his initial shock and guilt evolving into protectiveness. He'd moved into an apartment with friends and gotten a part-time job while continuing college, refusing further financial help from our parents. It's weird, he told me during one of our weekly coffee meetups. I'm actually happier supporting myself. I feel like a real adult for the first time. Welcome to my world, I said, only half joking. 6 months after graduation, I received a letter from my father, handwritten, not an email or text that could be easily ignored. I let it sit on my counter for 2 days before finally opening it. Inside was not the emotional plea I'd expected, but a full accounting of how they'd spent the money that should have been mine, with specific acknowledgement of the luxuries they'd enjoyed while I struggled. He detailed the kitchen remodel, the vacations, the boat, the shopping sprees, all of it laid bare without excuses. I can never undo the harm we caused, he wrote toward the end. I can never give you back the college experience you should have had. All I can do is acknowledge what we took from you and commit to making financial amends. Whether you ever want a relationship with us again is entirely your decision, and I will respect whatever you choose. It wasn't perfect, but it was the most honest communication I'd received from either parent since the revelation at graduation dinner. I showed the letter to Dr. Cooper at our next session. "What do you make of this?" she asked after reading it. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "Part of me is still angry, will always be angry, I think. But another part recognizes this is the first time he's fully owned what they did without trying to justify it. Do you want to respond?" I considered the question carefully. Not yet, but maybe someday. As the 1 year anniversary of my graduation approached, I found myself in a vastly different place than I'd imagined. My career was progressing well. I'd already received a small promotion at the marketing firm where I worked. My new apartment felt like home. I'd made new friends and strengthened relationships with old ones who'd stuck by me through the family turmoil. Most importantly, I'd begun rebuilding my sense of self outside the context of my parents' manipulation. The family counseling my parents had suggested finally happened, though not as they had envisioned. Instead of rejoining the family unit, I agreed to 3 sessions with them and a therapist specializing in family estrangement and reconciliation. The first session was painful. Mom still clung to justifications, arguing that they had always had my best interests at heart. Dad, to his credit, redirected her several times, reminding her they were there to listen, not defend. The second session went deeper, with the therapist guiding us through specific incidents,
times I'd asked for financial help and been denied, holidays when I'd worked double shifts while they vacationed, the day I'd been diagnosed with shingles and couldn't afford the full medication regimen. I had to choose between antiviral medication and paying rent, I explained, my voice steady despite the painful memory. That same month, you posted pictures of your weekend at a fancy vineyard trip on social media. Mom flinched visibly. We didn't know you were that sick. I called you from the doctor's office. I told you exactly how sick I was and asked if you could help with the prescription cost. You said money was tight that month. By the third session, something had shifted. Mom's defenses had begun to crack, revealing what seemed like genuine remorse beneath. I think, she said slowly, we convinced ourselves that because you were managing, because you were strong enough to handle everything, it was okay to use the money for other things. We started with small amounts and justifications, and it snowballed. We failed you, Dad said simply. As parents, our job was to support you, not exploit your strength. It wasn't a magical healing moment. One conversation couldn't undo years of deception, but it was a step towards something resembling honesty between us. Outside of therapy, I continued building my independent life. I joined a support group for adults dealing with family estrangement, finding comfort in stories similar to my own. I volunteered as a financial literacy mentor for college students, helping them understand money management and avoid predatory loans. When Grandma Beatrice suggested a weekend trip to a coastal town for my birthday, I accepted without the automatic guilt calculation I'd always done before, weighing the cost against work hours I'd miss, budget limitations, academic pressures. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I simply enjoyed the experience without underlying anxiety. You seem lighter, Grandma observed as we walked along the beach on the final evening of our trip. I feel lighter, I agreed. It's strange. Losing the family I thought I had has been painful, but it's also freed me from trying to earn love that should have been unconditional. She squeezed my hand. The right people love you without making you prove you deserve it. That truth, so simple yet so fundamental, became my guiding principle as I navigated the new landscape of my family relationships. I maintained careful boundaries with my parents, allowing small points of contact while protecting my emotional and financial well-being. I strengthened bonds with Grandma Beatrice, Caleb, and extended family members who'd supported me through the family turmoil. Most importantly, I learned to trust myself, my perceptions, my needs, my right to ask for what I deserved. The painful revelation at my graduation dinner had shattered the family narrative I'd grown up believing. But from those fragments, I was building something stronger, a life based on truth rather than comfortable illusions. 1 year after the graduation dinner that changed everything, I found myself at another restaurant table with Grandma Beatrice. This time, we were celebrating my promotion at work, a small gathering with just the two of us, Caleb, Aunt Jessica, and a few close friends. The contrast with last year's celebration couldn't have been more striking. There was genuine warmth around this table, honest relationships built on mutual respect rather than manipulation and deceit. I looked around at these people who had supported me through the most difficult year of my life and felt a profound sense of gratitude. I'd like to propose a toast, Grandma said, raising her glass. To Harper, not just for her professional success, but for her courage, integrity, and resilience this past year. I've never been prouder. As glasses clinked and conversations flowed, I reflected on the journey of the past 12 months. The career progression was significant. I'd moved from entry-level marketing assistant to junior account manager, with a salary increase that still felt surreal after years of financial struggle. But the personal growth had been even more profound. I had established a new apartment I loved in a safe building with reliable utilities and no basement flooding. Simple standards I'd once thought beyond my reach. I'd built emergency savings and started investing for retirement. I developed confidence in financial decisions that once would have paralyzed me with anxiety. More complicated was the evolution of my family relationships. My parents and I had reached a tentative peace. Our contact remained limited, occasional family therapy sessions, brief phone calls on holidays, carefully negotiated boundaries. The full financial restitution was nearly complete, with the final payments scheduled for the coming month. The emotional reconciliation was more complex and ongoing. My father had shown what appeared to be genuine remorse, working consistently in therapy to understand the harm they'd caused. My mother's journey was more halting, her instinct to justify still emerging in moments of stress, though she was also making efforts I wouldn't have thought possible a year ago.
Do you ever think you'll fully forgive them? Caleb asked during a quiet moment as we waited for dessert. I'm working toward forgiveness, I answered honestly, not for their sake, but for mine. Carrying anger is exhausting. And trust? He pressed. That's different, I acknowledged. Forgiveness is about making peace with the past. Trust is about predicting the future. I can forgive what they did without trusting them not to do it again. This distinction between forgiveness and trust, between acknowledging someone's humanity and protecting yourself from their flaws, had been one of the most valuable lessons of the past year. I had learned that compassion didn't require vulnerability, that understanding didn't necessitate exposure. With my parents, I'd established what Dr. Cooper called controlled contact, interaction with clear boundaries and limited emotional investment. I could appreciate their efforts toward change without depending on its permanence. I could acknowledge their remorse without needing it to be perfect. The hardest part, I told my support group during a particularly meaningful session, was letting go of the family I thought I had. I'd spent so many years believing in this narrative about my hardworking, supportive parents who were doing their best despite limited resources. Accepting that this was largely fiction meant grieving the family I'd invented in my mind. That grief had moved through stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally, a kind of acceptance. Not acceptance that what they did was okay, but acceptance that it had happened, that it had shaped me, and that I could build something worthwhile from that painful foundation. My relationship with Grandma Beatrice had deepened into something more equal and honest. Our weekly phone calls and monthly visits became anchoring points in my new life. She'd become not just a grandmother, but a mentor and friend, sharing wisdom without attempting to control my choices. I've been thinking about what happened with your parents, she told me during one of our Sunday calls. I realized I played a role too. I should have checked directly with you about the money. I assumed that because they were your parents, they would naturally act in your best interest. You trusted them because that's what family is supposed to mean, I reassured her. Yes, but I've learned something important from all this, she continued. Love without verification can enable harm, even when intentions are good. Real support means making sure help actually reaches its destination. This wisdom had practical applications beyond our family drama. I'd started a small support group for college students facing financial hardship, sharing resources and strategies while emphasizing the importance of financial literacy and boundaries. The experience of helping others navigate challenges similar to my own had become an unexpected source of healing. You've turned your pain into purpose, Dr. Cooper observed during what would be one of our final regular sessions. That's not something everyone manages to do. As dessert arrived at our celebration dinner, I looked around the table again, struck by how much had changed and how much remained to be discovered. The path forward wasn't perfectly clear. Relationships would continue to evolve. Challenges would emerge.
Healing would progress at its own pace, but for perhaps the first time, I felt equipped to navigate that uncertainty. The most profound lesson of the past year hadn't been about money or even family, but about truth. I'd learned that facing reality, however painful, offered freedom that no comfortable illusion could provide. The momentary devastation of discovering my parents' betrayal had ultimately liberated me from years of unnecessary struggle and self-doubt. Earth to Harper, Caleb teased, waving a hand in front of my face. You went somewhere else for a minute there. I smiled, returning to the present moment, just thinking about how different things are from last year. Better or worse? Asked one of my friends. Different, I repeated. More honest, more real. And that was the heart of it. The authenticity that now infused my relationships, my work, my sense of self. The revelation at my graduation dinner had stripped away pretense and performance, forcing a reckoning with reality that, while initially devastating, ultimately cleared space for something genuine to grow. As we finished our meal and prepared to leave, Grandma Beatrice pulled me aside for a private moment. She said, I've been thinking about what you told me when we were at the coastal town about feeling freed from trying to earn love that should have been unconditional. I nodded, remembering the conversation. That's the real tragedy in what your parents did. Not just the financial deception, but making you believe you had to earn their support through suffering. Real love doesn't require that kind of earning. I know that now, and I realized I truly did. As we walked out into the evening air, I felt a sense of peace that had nothing to do with perfect resolution or complete healing. It was the quiet confidence of knowing I could face whatever came next without the burden of false narratives or unnecessary struggle. The truth, with all its complexity and the occasional pain, had set me free in ways I was still discovering. The family I once believed in might have been partly an illusion, but the life I was building now was gloriously, imperfectly real and entirely my own. Thank you all for listening to my story. If you've ever experienced family betrayal or had to rebuild trust after deception, drop a comment below and share your experience. Has anyone else discovered financial manipulation in their family? How did you handle it? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more stories about overcoming family trauma and building authentic relationships. Like and share if this resonated with you. Your support helps me continue sharing these difficult but important conversations. Remember, sometimes the most painful revelations lead to the most meaningful growth.